Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm here with Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin. We were in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You call this state the battleground state. Yes, you are not hedging on this. You say your race is 50-50. The presidential race here is 50-50. One of the reasons I wanted to come here was see if the polling sort of is meted out on the ground. How close is it, and what's your path to victory as you see it?
Yeah, so we've been a battleground state for some years now. If you think of 2016, Donald Trump won the state by 0.7%. And it was the tipping point state for him to win the presidency. But 4 years later, Joe Biden won Wisconsin by 0.6%. That's like 1 or 2 votes per precinct in our state. And this looks like it's going that same path. So now everything comes down to turnout. Which side really gets their voters out, does the hard work for those who are still undecided, there's a handful still, and helps them get to the polls and reminds them that their vote is their power.
I should say we're sitting on your campaign bus, and you're on this multi-day bus tour. On you acknowledge that the balance of the Senate sort of hangs on this seat. How do you navigate that, and does it push you maybe more moderate as a result as you kind of think of just the role or the importance of this seat to Democrats?
You know, I think really the choices here are really between somebody, myself, who's been fighting for the working people of this state, and a candidate who is much more interested in multimillionaires and big corporations. And that couldn't be on clearer display when you look at the fact that he supports a $4 trillion tax cut that would disproportionately impact and benefit multimillionaires like himself and big corporations, whereas I'm trying to get working people tax cuts, the child tax credit, the deduction for those who are starting up a business, deductions to make home ownership more available to first-time home buyers. Those are the things that I want to see through. But that contrast couldn't be on sharper display between myself and Eric Hovde. And then, you know, how would he pay for that $4 trillion tax cut? He proposes a plan that would reset federal spending to levels from the last decade. And if we did that, it would mean cuts to Social Security, about $6,000 a year for the average beneficiary. I mean, we couldn't be more different on the economy and fighting for working people. I think Wisconsinites want somebody who is working every day for them.
On the economy, we look at our poll, the Bloomberg Morning Consult poll, we look at other polls. The economy is the number one issue in each and every one of them. Is that true as you talk to voters here in this state? Is that the thing that they want to hear about from you, that they indeed care the most about?
It is certainly top of mind for voters who haven't seen any relief from the inflationary prices that were caused by the pandemic and the screwed up supply chains. You know, those supply chains have been addressed, but the corporations haven't buy at the grocery store every week, or you know, while inflation has gone up over 3 years by 14%, corporate profits at that same time have gone up 75%. My voters who are really squeezed by these prices want a cop on the beat helping them. And so I support legislation that would empower the Federal Trade Commission to go after corporate price gouging, investigate it, try to have a champion for consumers on the job.
We were in Sheboygan yesterday, and after you gave your speech, I talked to somebody who's supporting you, and I said, tell me about this place, and he began to point out places where there were companies who had been there or had reduced their footprints, and Kohler is chief among them. And he sort of wondered what would bring them back. This is sort of stock and trade rhetoric for your opponent, for former President Trump as well. He's telling voters that these companies will come back. Are there mechanisms by which you can do that, or is it time for voters to sort of recalibrate their expectations for what a manufacturing renaissance would look like in this country?
Yeah. So first, Kohler is still an iconic business, yes, very close by to Sheboygan. They have, I believe, sold one of their divisions, but they're still making sinks, faucets, shower heads right in that area of the state, and they have a very strong workforce. But I want to answer your question, because I consider myself one of the Buy America champion of the United States Senate. So when we're passing big pieces of legislation, I'm like, we got to make sure there's Buy America rules attached to this. And I was successful in getting permanent Buy America rules attached to the infrastructure bill, to the Chips and Science Act, to the Inflation Reduction Act. That is bringing jobs back to Wisconsin right now and keeping some jobs here that might otherwise have left. Give you an example. In Kenosha County, there's a company called Sanmina that makes circuitry type of things. We needed a specific type of circuitry for our broadband build-out. You know, the infrastructure bill pledges to get every residence and every business hooked up to high-speed internet. And so our Commerce Secretary, because of the Buy America rules, was able to go overseas, engage a CEO of a company and say, I need your product. And he said, go ahead and buy it. Well, there's this problem. Buy America rules. It means that you have to produce them in the U.S. Well, they found a compatible company, Sanmina in Kenosha, 200 new jobs right now being created because of Buy America rules. I think that's one very powerful tool to bring jobs back and to actually get a leadership role in some industries that we have previously given up and given away to other countries.
I want to ask you about health care, which of course
Yes.
complements the economy. You've talked a lot about the Dobbs decision. Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, promised massive reforms to Obamacare at a speech earlier this week. How critical is that an issue for you? How much is that resonating with voters, sort of the viability of the Affordable Care Act of Obamacare?
Yeah, my opponent, Eric Hovde, has said he wants to repeal it in its entirety. I helped write it when I was in the House of Representatives. The achievement of getting health insurance companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions was life-altering for millions of Americans. Millions of Americans have insurance today because the companies can no longer say no and cherry-pick their customers, right? And I wrote the provision that allows young people to stay on their parents' health insurance till they turn 26. That's another game changer for folks right out of high school whose first job probably isn't going to offer full health insurance. And so we have to strengthen and build upon the Affordable Care Act, but we cannot go through another period of time where Republicans are threatening to repeal it and people are feeling the lack of certainty about their future, their ability to have the basic security that health insurance provides.
We have 1 minute left. Vice President Harris delivered a big speech yesterday, her closing argument, and she acknowledged the fact that there are still voters who don't know her, who feel like they don't know her, what she stands for. Could you just give us some anecdote, some sense of who she is that might help those voters understand how she operates, what she's like as somebody who worked with her so closely in the Senate and now is with her as vice president?
Yeah, well, I just look at her resume. She was the top prosecutor for the largest state in the country and held perpetrators to account. She, on the Judiciary Committee, was masterful at holding power to account. I think that that's one thing that you need to know about Kamala Harris, is that's been her history. And I think she's going to be a really, really strong president.
On the bus with Senator Tammy Baldwin in Green Bay, Wisconsin.